Welcome to Series 2 of the Productivity for Profit podcast. In this second series, we'll be talking about the mindset behind being productive. Knowing the tools and techniques that increase and maintain our effectiveness are so valuable, and it's our mindset that determines just how powerful they are. So I'm bringing in some very special guests to discuss an array of mindset topics, from how we speak to ourselves, our money mindset, holistic therapies, vibrational energy, and more, so that we can maximize our favorite techniques and take our productivity to a new level. Welcome to this episode of the Productivity for Profit podcast. And in this series, Series 2, we're looking at the mindset behind our productivity, because we can have all the actions and techniques, but if we haven't got our mindset in place, then we're limited as to how effective we can be. And today I've brought in expert Celia Griver, and we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. Now, Celia is a clinical hypnotherapist, and she helps people with anxiety, sleep problems, eating, drinking, stress. So, Celia, welcome, and tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today. I really describe what I do as I work with all the stuff that goes on in your head so that it works for you rather than holding you back. And really what I do is I help you to move through life knowing that you've got the vitality, motivation and confidence to flourish no matter what else is going on around you, and freeing you really to have that energy and focus to create the life you've always dreamed about.
And there is so much going on at the moment, isn't there? We're just being bombarded, particularly at the moment. So just for reference, in the news, Ukraine conflict has really escalated. We've got more and more changes to life, as in going back to so-called normal. There's just so much going on, isn't there? We've just had huge storms, so we're just bombarded with so many different sort of stresses and things that cause us anxiety. So your role, I presume, is more important than ever right now.
Yep, I mean, people have really suffered over the last couple of years as well. And it's really important, I suppose, to have that inner strength. That's what I work on, that inner strength and stability, so that you can be able to take the actions that you need to take for you, for your life, for the people you care about, the things that matter to you, no matter what's going on around you, because there will always be things going on around us, whether they are national, international things like we've been talking about and experiencing, or whether they're personal things within our family, illness, people losing jobs, financial difficulties. Stuff happens to us. If we live a life, stuff happens to us. And so really what I like to do is to work with my clients to give them that, the tools and resources, but most particularly that inner certainty and strength that they can cope with whatever life throws at them.
Yeah. And today we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome. And most people who are listening today are going to be business owners, business leaders, entrepreneurs. And imposter syndrome is something that we hear about, we probably recognise in ourselves, but it's incredibly common, isn't it? So tell us a bit more about what imposter syndrome is.
Most of us have had at some time in our life that experience of feeling like we're an imposter. Maybe we get a new job and you think, oh my goodness, how did I get here? How am I going to manage that? They think I can do this, I can't do it. But for most people that goes over time. So the first thing I've described is that feeling of being an imposter. The actual imposter syndrome is slightly different, because the evidence that we get that we can cope, that we're good at our jobs, that that people value us, it doesn't, for some reason it doesn't stick, it doesn't go in, and so it becomes something that is sustained, so that we keep on feeling that we are imposters, that we're only here because of luck, or because people didn't know any better, or some fluke got me into this job, somehow I've managed to convince all these people to be my clients, but I really haven't got the ability to deal with that. So these are the kind of imposterish thoughts. And if they persist, then we would call that imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is believed to affect about 70% of people. So it's very, very common. And the original research thought it was something that was just affected women, but actually it affects everybody across all walks of life, all professions, gender.
So when we think about it being common, which is pluralistic ignorance, that term that, I hadn't heard about until quite recently, but it is that incorrect belief that we are the only one. That it's sad in a way that we have these self-doubting beliefs and they're causing us this almost shame, and we hide it. So why do we feel shame about imposter syndrome if it's this common? And we kind of know that we're not the only ones that feel it. So how can we share with others when there's this shame attached?
Part of the reason that we feel shame is because we feel we're the only ones that are like this. But actually, when we start to talk to other people and realise that we're not alone, it has a really normalising effect, so that we realise that this is part of the human condition, part of the experience of not everybody, because not everybody has it, but part of the experience of most people is that they will experience this at some point of their lives. Shame is a very pervasive human experience as well. And sometimes we can have these feelings, these emotions, and we get so caught up in them that it actually stops us from doing the things that will help us not to experience them. Actually, if we feel shame about feeling like an imposter, that can actually be reinforcing. It will reinforce the problem because we feel we're the only person that has it. There's something wrong with me. And then that can reinforce it. It can make it feel more shameful. So we get caught up in this vicious cycle. And what can happen then is, because we have these feelings, the behaviours that we do, the actions we take, can also reinforce them. So, for instance, I feel like I'm an imposter, therefore I work really, really hard. I work really long hours. I don't allow anybody to help me because I feel that sounds like failing. I make sure I have to do everything perfectly, so I spend hours checking that. And then the result of that is you end up feeling, well, I'm still an imposter. I only haven't been found out because I've worked really hard. I've checked everything 15 times. I haven't allowed anybody to help me. So it can not only reinforce the actions, but reinforce those emotions as well.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how the human mind works? Yeah. And often we can trace these thoughts that we have about we're not good enough, we're not qualified enough, we're going to be found out. We can often trace them back to something about our identity that we held when we were children. For example, for me, I was the scatty one or the ditzy one or whatever it was. For some people, it will be, the lazy one, the funny one. Or sometimes you can hear people described around you, say, so your siblings or your friends, they're the musical one or they're the creative one or the sporty one. And so you almost translate that to mean, well, if that's what they are, I'm not.
Yes, and also, this is going to get quite complex, it's also how we learn language. So we learn language in comparison. So we learn good in relation to bad. So actually, if you get told that you're good, when you hear good, you hear, I'm not bad. So then we worry. So by praising someone for being good, they could actually worry about being bad. And I think there's another thing at work here as well, and that is the education system. Certainly, I know when my children were going through school, and they're young adults now, but I don't imagine it's changed. They would do well at something and then have to meet with their teacher and say, well, how can you do better? And also at work, when we have appraisals at work, you could be doing really, really well in your job, but it's always, well, how can I do better? So then, of course, what goes into our head is, I must do better. I'm not doing well enough. Good enough isn't good enough. All these messages get ingrained in our minds, and all of these things feed into imposter syndrome, I believe.
Yes, well, there is, even in this entrepreneurial world, we're always saying, well, how can we do better? How can we learn from our mistakes? I'm guilty of saying that myself. Yeah. We do have to be careful, don't we, about the fact that we're not putting undue pressure on ourselves. There's a way to say these things.
And of course, it is good to learn. It's good to learn from mistakes. But when the idea of having a mistake is so awful, that's really when you want to look at, if it's just mistake feedback, looking at it as feedback, that's a really positive approach, rather than really looking at it as a mistake already, just the terminology, you think, oh, something's gone wrong, I've done something wrong. But actually seeing it as feedback can be much more helpful for people.
And when we do that appraisal process, sometimes it's almost as if all that positive is overlooked because, the next point I've got to talk about is, well, what can I do better? It undermines all that positive that you've just discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the way that the human mind works is, if we hear a positive, we will also hear a negative, because we understand those things in combination, or good, but then I could even be better. Again, depending on upbringing and the messages that we received and the way that our brains work. So two people might receive the same messages growing up, but they might come out of those very differently. So there is something to do with the brain making random associations between things as well. So there's so many different things that are going on that contribute to it.
That reasoning that we come to as children when we hear these messages and we translate them and then form these thoughts, and with that comes an emotion, and then those fuse, don't they? Yeah. And then that creates a belief. We're kind of programmed in our early life, and then because it's subconscious, it overrides reality or truth. Our brains just kick straight back into that programmed thought. And it reacts so quickly that we haven't even got time to decide whether it's true or not.
Absolutely. So it becomes an automatic reaction. So what happens is, when we have a particular thought or we do a behaviour over time and time again, we create these neural pathways in our brain. The point is, you cannot get rid of them. Once they're there, they're there. You can't unknow something, you can't unhave a thought. It's just not humanly possible. But what you can do is you create new neural pathways by having new thoughts, new behaviours, and then over time these new neural pathways become your dominant pathways, so that those automatic behaviours will become your dominant way of thinking, feeling and behaving. And that's really what I working with people. We call it lots of things, we do lots of different things, but fundamentally what we're doing is working with people to create new neural pathways. It's what you're doing as well. If you become more productive, being productive will become your automatic default reaction.
So sometimes when we have these thoughts that are associated with imposter syndrome, what can we do to, first of all, we've got to recognise them as such, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be the first step. So how can we do that? Because sometimes until something brings our attention to it, we're just on autopilot and we're just thinking these things, we're believing them, and it's just how we live our everyday life. So how can we become more conscious when they crop up so that we can start to, as you say, rewire those pathways?
So noticing them is the first step, and also experiencing them as not us, but as something that is outside us. So for instance, when the thought comes up, not I'm an imposter, but I'm having the experience of imposter syndrome, or I'm having the thought that I'm an imposter, or I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough, or I personally my mind is telling me that I'm an imposter, because that really, really, for me, that clicks in the fact that my mind, there's my mind going again, telling me these things, random things that I'm reacting to. So those are all ways that you can start to step back from them, so that actually, thoughts may come. The thing about imposter syndrome as well is that we experience it when we are getting out of our comfort zone, when we're doing something new. And of course, our comfort zone is very comfortable. You don't feel it there. So actually starting to recognize that I'm having these thoughts because I'm going out there, I'm going out into the world, I'm achieving, I'm doing something new, then that can also be a really helpful way of reframing imposter syndrome. So it's not something that comes because I'm no good. It's something that comes because I'm doing something really important, making changes, working on my business, getting a promotion at work. And that is another really helpful way of looking at it.
So you could see it as sort of the first sign of a potential new opportunity on the horizon, or a new experience, or making new memories, because if you're getting out of your comfort zone, that's where the magic often lies, isn't it? On the other side of just the day-to-day and the autopilot, that's when something new comes along. So that could be a more positive way of reframing what imposter syndrome is, rather than seeing it as something that holds us back. It could be the fact that we're just on the brink of discovering something new and exciting. I like that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if we were going into something new, maybe you've left your job and you're starting your own business. Well, of course you're going to feel these feelings. Actually, it's quite normal to feel them. And what kind of a person would you be if you were going into starting a business? Maybe you've quit your job and you didn't feel an imposter. You would, but it's also this idea of not focusing on that, because in this example of you've quit your job, you've started your new business. I may feel an imposter, but I may feel excitement as well. I may feel curiosity, I may feel lots of things. And so the idea is really, you want to widen your perspective. So not narrowly focusing on, well, I'm just feeling this imposter syndrome, but I'm feeling excitement, and I'm feeling really great because I'm meeting all these new people. And I've gone to my first networking meeting and I did feel an imposter, but I also felt really interested in the 5 really, really fascinating people I spoke to. And wasn't it inspiring? They were just where I was a year ago, and now look at them. And so then that we're widening where how we see ourselves, how we see our experiences, again, creating different neural pathways. Another really good thing to focus on is gratitude. So, people talk about gratitude diaries all the time. One thing about doing a gratitude diary is you are creating new neural pathways. You're having this repetition along the new neural pathways by focusing on gratitude, curiosity, other things. But the other thing is, it takes your self-focus away from achievement. So everything isn't about what have I achieved, what have I done, could I have done better? But it's your focus is external, what you are grateful for, whether that is a beautiful day like it is today, the people you're meeting, whatever. So it's just taking your focus. So I think that's another really helpful way to help with imposter syndrome as well.
Yeah, it's taking your attention away to something positive, isn't it? And I must admit, I've been doing more of that myself, and it definitely works. But talking about those feelings of the imposter syndrome, the fear, the anxiety, but then also the excitement, the way our physiological response to those emotions is so similar, isn't it? It's if you feel that sort of rise in temperature or the butterflies in the stomach, they happen with so many different emotions, positive and negative. So if you're very passionate and you're excited, or if you're anxious and fearful, the way you feel it in your body can be very, very similar, can't it? So how do you start? And I think it's something that is perhaps just something you just have to be aware of, and eventually you start to understand it better. But is there a way of knowing which of those emotions you're feeling, because the way the body feels at that moment in time is just so similar?
It is very similar, and it's very subtle. So this is something called interoceptive awareness, which is learning to pay attention to the sensations in your body and being able to differentiate between them, because although they feel very similar, for instance, if you focus in on them, they may not be the same. The other thing is, if we feel something that feels like anxiety, we may push that feeling away and feel like, oh, I don't want to have that feeling, therefore I don't want this thought, so therefore we're pushing things away. But actually, if you can allow that feeling and say to yourself, oh, here's anxiety, you know what, that feels very similar to when I was excited, actually allowing that, and then that again, it can neutralize that experience, because it's not something we're scared of that's telling us all this horrible information. It's just an experience very similar to the experience of excitement that I felt before I was going on holiday, or whatever it was, when I got the keys for my new house. Bringing that into a full range of human emotions, because actually what we want in life is to be able to experience that full range of human emotions. If we didn't have anxiety or imposter syndrome, we also wouldn't have the good things.
And it's curiosity, isn't it? Well, what's going on here? What is this feeling? Yeah. Where's it coming from? And just being curious about it rather than scared of it can help you just to think, oh, this is interesting. What's going on here?
Absolutely.
And that can help you to, in future, be less afraid of it, but also to perhaps see things that are right in front of your face that you really can't see because of the fear. It's cutting you off from seeing these opportunities, or the fear almost puts up this massive wall and you retreat.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what happens when we feel these like strong feelings of anxiety, that our natural reaction is to avoid them. So, for instance, say I was feeling anxious about giving a talk, so I'd make an excuse not to give the talk, and I would then immediately, you get this feeling of relief. But what happens is you're never learning that you can cope with it, and so next time I don't even say yes, no, I don't want to give a talk, and then the next thing that's a bit challenging, you think, oh no, I don't, and gradually we find that we're avoiding more and more things. What the research shows you is that over time you actually also start to avoid pleasurable things just in case, and so that's how you're getting more and more in your comfort zone. And actually what we want to do is we want to get out of our comfort zone and have these experiences, and they can be scary and they can be frightening.
And I think that's what a lot of people have felt over the last couple of years, isn't it? Because they've become afraid sometimes of the world. We're now getting more experiences and opportunities, go and see this concert, go out to dinner with these people, and they're retreating. And what would have been fun once is now seen in a completely different light because of what we've all been through.
Absolutely. And the imposter syndrome isn't just work related. People can feel it in social situations as well. And certainly what I'm seeing in my clients is that a lot more social anxiety, about anxiety going into social situations, because we felt safe and comfortable in our Zoom meetings, maybe not even having your camera on if you're in a big group, and actually going out into the world again is filling people with worry.
And then that can be brought round to productivity, can't it? Because if people are not getting out there and networking, they're not putting their work out there, because they feel imposter syndrome, they've got this idea of the success they want to see, but it's impossible to get there. And of course, you can do it in lots of different ways. There's no one way to get from where you are now to where you want to be. You've got lots and lots of options, but you've got to be doing something. You've got to be making progress. But if you're more anxious, then those potential avenues are going to become overwhelming. And so you do the work behind the scenes, but you stay behind the scenes. You don't put yourself out there, and it's very hard to see the success you want in your business when you're hiding.
And also, you will not see success and you will not improve your productivity if you're not willing to have uncomfortable feelings. You can say that for life. We need to have uncomfortable feelings to be able to progress.
Yes, and some people will find that super exciting, and other people will find it overwhelming. So for those that find it overwhelming, it's finding a solution, isn't it, to, especially if you can take the information that you've provided today and you can create those new neural pathways, you can divert your attention onto something else. These are things that most of us can do, but there will be people who just can't get there on their own. So these are the people that will come to you, who want help, who either cannot do it or just know that the quickest way to do it is to come and get help from somebody like yourself. And you use hypnotherapy, which is obviously a fascinating subject. So if we feel that we are really, really stuck and it's our business is suffering, our family life, our social life, our personal life, everything is being restricted and held back because of the way we're feeling and because of imposter syndrome, how would you help somebody with that in your practice?
I have to say that what I do is very, very individual. So what I do is I don't particularly fit people into my model or what I'm doing, but I look at what's going on with them. So I would have a very detailed consultation with them first, where we really look at what's causing their problems and what's maintaining that. And then I'd come up with what we'd call a treatment plan. It's just a fancy way of saying the things we can do to help them, but they would be really very much designed around them. And so, for instance, all the tools and techniques that I would teach them would be broken down into really manageable, knowing people are busy. So, it's not the kind of thing I do is not go and meditate for an hour a day. It would be, well, how can I give you a little quick exercise that you can do in 3 minutes a day, something like that. Teach them tools and techniques that they can use throughout their life. So it's a really very, very practical approach. That the hypnotherapy, again, is something that you can do 20 minutes hypnotherapy, but you can also, and something I would teach my clients, is how to hypnotize themselves, how to use self-hypnosis in little 3-minute chunks that they can put into their day. For instance, something that they could use before going into a stressful event. They could use that power of their mind to calm themselves down, imagine themselves doing well in whatever they wanted to do, but just for a few minutes, before they go into that event.
So I'm sure that people are saying, oh, that sounds interesting. I wonder if it could help me. So what could they potentially be experiencing, the challenges that they have, that this could help? So that, because some people will go, well, I don't think it'll help me, or, I have this problem, but is that the solution for me? So tell us some of the issues that people have where this would be a good avenue to explore.
So, imposter syndrome in general, certainly anything really around anxiety. And also, I guess one of the problems with these feelings of imposter syndrome is what we do to avoid having these unpleasant feelings. So, for instance, you really need to go and write your website, but what do? You might go and procrastinate in some way, or maybe you start overeating or over drinking because you don't want these feelings. So again, these are the kind of behaviours that I can help with. I've also helped people with business-related things, like helping them with their focus, for instance, going into either situations, or even when you're working and you are pulled into the past, you're thinking about the past, if only I hadn't given up my job, with that, or worrying about the future. So helping them to really just be in that focus on what they've got to do, not have all these constant thoughts going around in their mind, I should have done this, what about that? So again, that I guess is another area that I've worked with people to help with that. And it's all interrelated as well. If we have a lot of thoughts, then we might be pushing them away. We might be feeling bad. We might be feeling stressed, not looking after ourselves, not exercising. Actually, again, the typical thing with imposter syndrome is you would spend those 12 hours in front of your computer working really, really hard. And actually what we want to work with is to help with some of those thoughts, so that you can actually get to the point where, I know if I take half an hour away from my desk, go for a walk, I will feel so much better, I will work so much better. But people have to learn and experience them for themselves. You can't tell people what to do, they have to want to do it themselves. So working again with the goal setting, making things that work for the individual at the individual's pace.
As entrepreneurs, we are our own boss, aren't we? So the person that tells us we have to work 12 hours or get up at 5 a.m. is us.
It's us, yes.
The only person that can stop us doing that is us. So we're not doing it. And even if we've, worked in another company, sometimes we do more than necessary because we have imposter syndrome. And again, no one is telling us to do it. I remember when I was in the corporate world and I had to travel every week and I was always the first one in and the first one out. Nobody told me to do that. I was very successful at my job, but my imposter syndrome told me, and I was promoted, I think, 5 times in 2 years. So I was doing really well. I kept telling myself, and it wasn't even really a conscious thought, but I would be there first. I would be there last. I would go above and beyond. because I was always thinking that I had to do more and more and more, regardless of the fact, actually, I was doing really well. And I ended up burning out. That was totally down to me. Nobody asked me to do those things, but I felt that I always had to do more. So it can be quite pervasive, can't it? And as you were saying, when you start to tackle that issue that you come with, it can have a far-reaching effect on other areas of life, can't it?
Absolutely, because all of the areas of our life are interrelated, because they're us. We take ourselves from one situation to the other situation to the other. So we're taking those things with us. Yes, absolutely. And we may actually feel very confident in some situations and as an imposter in another situation, but that usually stems from the fact that we feel knowledgeable and skilled in one and not necessarily in the other. You know, I really encourage people to see themselves as a whole being, and that we have worth and are important in all aspects of our life, in whether we're knowledgeable or not. If we have a dog, I'm not really good at dog breeds. Can you give me a breed of dog? Give me
a poodle.
Okay, if we have a poodle and we have a Labrador, okay, if you love that poodle, you expect that poodle to be poodleish. You do not think you're a poodle, you need to be a Labrador. But that's what we think with ourselves, yeah? That's what we think with ourselves. So we want to be able to accept ourselves in all our poodleness.
I love that. I love that. And it's saying that, you know, we are a whole person. And as an entrepreneur or a business owner, we do blend our lives. So if we're working from home, and more so for people in employment who are working from home, you know, when we have a work hat, if you go to work and you go out every day, you put your work hat on, so you can be one person at home and one person when you're there. Even though you're the same person, you can still have different facets to your personality. You kind of switch on some of your work mode. But when we're working at home or we're an entrepreneur, that tends to really blur, doesn't it? In which case it can carry over in a way that it didn't before. So, and I do this with a lot of our tasks and our time management, is starting to unblur those lines a bit, because although we are one person, and yes, we have lots of characteristics that we can carry into all areas of our life, and we should, sometimes we do want an element of separation and to unblur those lines.
So what is a really useful tip if you are working from home, whether as an entrepreneur or in a job, is when you have finished work for the day, to get your shoes on, go just for a little walk around the block, for it can be 3 minutes, then come in, open your front door, just like you would if you were coming home from work. And that's your pause between your working life and your non-working life.
It's very easy just to think, oh, I'm going to stop. Oh, I'll just do this. Oh, I'll just do this. Oh, I'll just do this. And to have that actual physical break and leaving your place of work and then coming home, even if both are the same thing, I think that's a great idea. I love that tip. I think that's top tip there. I'm definitely going to be incorporating that one. I love that. So, Celia, thank you so much. Anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
Just that I have a lot of self-help information on my website, lots of blogs on different related areas. I always have self-help tips. There's a lot of things that you can do for yourself. So I would just encourage people to do that, and encourage people to know that they don't have to put up with any of these feelings or things that are holding them back, that there is always hope. We can all change. We're all capable of change, no matter how old we are. The brain is plastic, neuroplastic, in that it's capable of change, and just really to hold that in mind.
That's great, because I think we do label ourselves, and to know that that doesn't have to be the case and that we can change, that we are actually designed with the capability to change is fantastic. So what's your website? Where can we find you?
So my website is www.blossomhypnotherapy.com.
And where can we find you on socials?
On Facebook, it is Hypnotherapy Tunbridge. And on LinkedIn, it's Celia Griver.
Right, well, I'll put all those links in, and perhaps I'll put a link to your blog on imposter syndrome that I know is on your website, so I'll put a link straight to that.
Great, thanks. And my next one, the one for March, is going to be on overthinking. So again, imposter syndrome fits into that general overarching theme of overthinking. So that would be also one that people may want to have a look at.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. You've really enlightened us, and I think given people a lot of hope that this is not something that they have to live with, that they can empower themselves to make change, that there is help out there. And yeah, thank you so much. And I will see you all next time on the Productivity for Profit podcast.
And thank you very much for having me, Livy. It's been lovely chatting with you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Productivity for Profit podcast. Why not join my free Facebook group, Productivity for Profit, for more tips, tools and support on your journey to mastering your productivity and time management. If you've enjoyed the podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. If you're juggling the demands of a service-based business helping your clients and all the other demands of life, then you're probably feeling pretty short of time. So this is just for you. I have a brand new course that helps you to save a minimum of an hour every day. And what would you do with that extra hour? And how would that accumulate over a year? Would you make more money? Would you be more present with your family? Would you have more me time and prevent the burnout? Whatever you choose to do with that extra hour a day, we know that it's not just about what you do, but how you think. So this course is going to start with those quick wins of gaining you back some time, plugging the leaks, putting in the boundaries, but it's also going to help you to instill new beliefs that will allow you to make different choices. Because this is not just about quick wins, as good as they are, it's about long-term change and changing your life. So if this is something that you would like to know more about, then have a look in the show notes and find the link to the Save an Hour Every Day course.